Thank you, appreciate you. What's up? I said, okay, you're gonna have an open bar. Okay. Then you're gonna feed people carbs, like a plate of mashed potatoes. And then, like, Rebecca, entertain them. No problem. Okay, Carb Nation. Here's how this is going to roll. First of all, this is my actual cell phone number. This is my actual cell phone. If you have questions, maybe you just want to take a picture of this, maybe you want to quickly, you can use your phone, please feel free. But I will be taking some questions towards the end of my remarks tonight. So, boy, that looks a little dark. 414-559-1528 if you're sitting in the back. Maybe it just looks dark to me. You ready? Let's do it! All right. When you look around this room, what do you see? People. Yep, that's true. I was waiting for somebody to be like, I got beer goggles. I don't know what I see. When I look around this room, I see futurists. Honestly. Because you are all trying to put your dab of good in a place where it can benefit you and others tomorrow and the next month and the next week. We are all trying to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So whether you were trained or not, you are a futurist. And furthermore, if you have a 529 plan for your kid, if you have insurance, if you check the weather today, these are other proof points that I know you're a futurist, trying to figure out what the future will be. But I have a challenge for you. If we want to build bold and ambitious futures, which I actually think we are in a shortage of in this country, if we want to build bold and ambitious futures, it's not enough to be smart. Let me explain what I mean. I chose this image of waves. Waves lapping up on a shore. Smart people know how to ride the waves. The waves are the things that are in your social media feed. They are the news of the moment. They're this day's headlines, this week's headlines, this month's fire that you have to put out. Smart leaders know how to ride waves. They do it really well. Wise leaders ask, what's causing these waves? What are the currents that are making these waves occur? And my invitation to you tonight is to, of course, be smart, but let's also be wise. I've brought along a series of trends that I believe will shape Wisconsin over the course of the next 10 years. Shall we start? Trend one is churn. Churn is the sheer force of people moving from job to job, moving from job to retirement, moving from retirement back to job, because I didn't like retirement that much. That's called a failed retirement. Moving from job to entrepreneurship, moving from city to city and moving from state to state. One of my former clients, Raymond Lee, he was a CEO, city manager, of a city in Colorado. New city manager in Harvard Kennedy School offers this boot camp for new city managers. You go for a few weeks, you work on a capstone project, and when Raymond came back, I said to him, Raymond, what is the deal? What did you learn? And he said, Rebecca, what I learned is that people are moving. Churn. So, let's just do a quick survey. Just think about your close-in team, the people who you work with on a regular basis. Now, I want you to think back 2 years, click, 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 back to 2022. Put your hand in the air if, I'll do this auctioneer style to keep it interesting. Put your hand in the air if 10% of your workforce has changed over in the last 2 years. 10% of your workforce, keep your hand up, please. How many of you have had more than 30% of your workforce turnover? 3 in 10, 3 in 10. Do I see any 3 in 10? Please put your hands down. How many of you have had more than half of your workforce turnover in the last 2 years? Holy smokes, keep your hand up if you'd like somebody to buy you another drink tonight. Okay. Churn. We are seeing people moving. Now, this will have long-term ramifications. Here are some of the data points that to me are just eye-watering. Here's the first one. We have 900,000 fewer people in the labor force now than were projected in 2019. 900,000 people fewer. So for those of you who still have help wanted signs, you're still running ads, what if what you have is what you have, right? 900,000 fewer people in the labor force. In October of 2023, and again in October 2024, Challenger Gray and Christmas reports that we have had record number of CEO resignations. And you know, the flavor of the sundae starts at the top. So when the top spot is going through change, is going through churn, that impacts the entire organization. And by the way, it's a lot harder to be a CEO these days. It's one of those things like everybody thinks they want this job, and then they get it, and they're like, just a slow walk backwards, right? So we've had record high CEO resignations. Here's a great statistic. The number of high propensity businesses that have been started over the course of the last few years are higher than they've ever been. What are these? These are jobs that are most likely to create additional jobs. You know what? This is great for us long term, but it's going to be a little sketchy in the short term. It's going to make competing for talent harder. It could disrupt your market. It could bring new entrants into your market. So this is overall a great thing for Wisconsin's economy and the nation's economy, but in the short term, it makes things a little bit harder. This is my favorite stat about churn. U-Haul ran out of one-way moving trucks from California in 2020 and 2022. Ran out. U-Haul ran out. And Milwaukee and Madison were net beneficiaries during the time of COVID. We were top 20 in those lists during the time of COVID, but now we're not in the top 20 anymore for relocations. Now, when we think about churn, I want to invite us again to be wise. You're going to use two hands possibly for this. The first question, this will be your left hand. Think about the community that you call home. Community that you call home. Please raise your left hand if you have net in-migration. You're like, wow, a lot of people are moving in. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Great. Okay. Now, put your right hand if you're like, oh, we have net out-migration. Okay. Interesting. All right. Now, here's the thing. Every community has some people moving in, and every community has some people moving out. I was trained as an economist, and a labor economist would say that your net migration, say that you live in a community where 1,000 people have moved in, 2,000 people have moved out. What would be the net effect of that? Negative 1,000, right? That answer is not wrong, but it's also not right. It's also not right. Because if you have 1,000 people moving in, they may come in with all kinds of ideas from the last place that they lived, the way you should be running the community. That happens, doesn't it? And what if the 2,000 people who have left are like your culture keepers? You know, the people who are like the bedrock of the community, the ones you could always count on for things. The bottom line here is that culture walks on 2 feet. So simply looking at how many people are coming in and how many people are leaving is a smart way, but you've got to think about the overall impact that churn is having. It's having impact on our election maps. You know, it's having impact on voices that are showing up in our town hall meetings. It's having impact on citizens' expectations of us, and it's certainly having impact on our economies. Churn is the sheer force of people moving. And for teams, it takes between 3 and 5 years for a new team to find its gel, to find its legs. So churn is one of those things that's going to have a long-term effect on our economy. Let's go to the next trend. I know you're like, trend 3, I skipped trend 2. I can't do all 10 trends tonight. So trend 3 is homing. Homing. It's kind of crazy, isn't it, that in this country, in this state, our homes do a lot of things. They're supposed to be safe for us, the place that, you know, we can be sheltered. They're also supposed to be a store of value, right? They're supposed to be things that add to the bottom line. Homes are intended to do so much for us in our country, and yet We have a housing supply of 7 million homes in this country. We have a housing supply projected in Wisconsin through 2030 of 200,000 homes. 200,000 homes. Now, I want you to think about how many new housing licenses went through P&Z in your community last month, in the last quarter, in the last year. We cannot approve new housing starts at the rate that is needed. Our housing system is broken. Please put your hand in the air if you and your community right now are working on something related to homing. Something related to homing. Okay, now for those of you who don't have your hands in the air, are you thinking you're gonna have to get into it at some point? Anybody like on the cusp? All right? Thank you. Thank you. So we know that we have this housing shortage. And this is the thing that I've given the most thought to, probably over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years, which is how do we solve for this? And I think there are 3 things that we need to focus on. One is zoning. The second is how fast we build. And the third is something that most people are not talking about, but in a place as friendly, in a place as welcoming as Wisconsin, it's one that is a natural fit for us. Let me start with zoning. If you think about what normally happens at, in P&Z committees, single-family homes are the things that are easy to just approve. Yes, we're going to do that. And AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, came out several years ago and said, you know what we're missing, folks? We're missing middle housing. Middle housing. Things like duplexes and fourplexes and townhomes and anything that is a multi-use space or a live-work space. Now, I'm going to play this reel back again because I have been in dozens of P&Z Commission meetings. And anytime you talk about anything that is not a single family home, you hear something like, well, if there was really demand for it, the market would have already built it. And people on the other side are like, no, we really do want something to, the P&Z committee says, we think it would already be built if it was intended to be built. And then you look at the homes that the members of the P&Z committee have. What kind of homes do you think they have? Most have single-family homes. And you guys, this isn't good or bad, but we all have availability bias. We believe that people want what we have. It's another form of a confirmation bias. So we've got people on our planning and zoning commissions who inherently often have a bias towards the kind of housing that they have. And then when you start talking about density, you start hearing these dog whistles around classism and racism. So we have to be able to say, listen, this can be affordable and it can be beautiful, right? This can be a net improvement in many, many neighborhoods. So there are a lot of opportunities for how we can work and live in our neighborhoods a little bit differently. But here's the truth. Minneapolis, 5 years ago, Minneapolis took single-family homes out of the zoning code, removed them from the zoning code. And what happened? Housing stock increased 12%. Houston said, we're going to do something radical as well. We're going to stop the requirement for 4,000 square feet of lot size per house, and we're going to drop it down to 1,440 square feet of lot size. And what happened there? They were able to stop the upward trend of rent. So if we rethink zoning, we already are starting to develop some more speed around getting housing going. But now let's actually talk about speed of building. There are so many ways that we can increase speed, right? We can have, here you see Zip Homes on the far left. We can have homes built off-site of where we're actually going to put them. In completely temperature-controlled facilities, it decreases waste, increases efficiency, and it allows you to build these homes pretty quickly. Because when we're building on-site, we're limited by weather, and we know what that means here in Wisconsin, right? So we can do homes built off-site and have them brought in. Here in the center, this was a flat pack home. How many of you have been to IKEA? Anybody know IKEA? flat pack furniture, right? So this home in the middle comes with approximately 1,100 Allen wrenches, but it's got a lot of instructions. You can put it up yourself, right? And then there are other innovations like how can we use containers for housing? All kinds of ways that we could solve for this if we had the will to do it. I talked with an entrepreneur a couple weeks ago because he's in this space of wanting to figure out how to modularize homes, do flat pack homes, et cetera. But in the community he wants to work in, there is no way for the zoning commission to approve him because they can't tell him what the joinery would need to be on a flat pack home. They simply don't have the code for it. So we need to kind of get with the program here and create some of these zoning amendments that are going to help us make more room for more kinds of housing. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here with speed of homes is many of you have seen Icon. They're out of Austin, Texas. And Icon can build a home like this in under 8 days. This is a 3D printed home. Now, listen, if you were a nerd in high school, you knew you would eventually win, but we really are winning. How many people were in band in high school? You guys, we've done it. We have done it. The nerds at Icon, about half of them are robotics nerds, and the other half are material science nerds. Why? Well, the robotics nerds figure out how to do 3D printed homes with like robots that they move on site. But the material science nerds, they figure out, okay, what is the context that we're building for? Because, you don't need to build homes you don't want to do stick-built homes in areas that are going to be prone to fires, as an example. So the material science nerds are like, hey, what's going to be the best kind of material, 3D printed material that we can use for this kind of home? And then this image is so beautiful, isn't it? This honeycombing. It's one of nature's signatures for how you keep moderate temperatures inside of a home. So the material science, the robotics nerds come together and they figure out how to do it fast, how to build it on site in a design and with materials that make sense for the context. Imagine. So, speed of building. Another thing that is right there for the taking, if we'll just take it. To put this in perspective, when I built my first and my only home that I will ever build, because you know the hell that is, right? When I built my home in 2004, it took the exact same amount of time as it took my parents to build their home in 1972. Something is broken. If I can get my mortgage with like a thumbprint or an optic retinal scan, I can get that in 5 seconds, but it takes this much time to build, right? So speed of building, it's right there for the taking. The final thing I want to talk about is housing as a cure. By any fair reading of the facts, there are 2 demographic groups that are suffering from loneliness. And the Surgeon General warned recently that loneliness is deadly. People who suffer from loneliness often suffer from deaths of despair. Loneliness is as fatal as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And if you look at any fair reading of the facts, it is our youngest and our oldest who are suffering most from loneliness. Our elders, because we tend to institutionalize them or put them in their own communities, it's like if you've stopped working, you've stopped being relevant. Listen, there is no other society that lasts for thousands of years that treats its elders that way. So we've got some room to grow, America. But the second thing is our younger people. So this first solution I want to talk about starts to treat housing as a cure for loneliness in our communities, and the solution is called Nesterly. The city of Boston, other cities are using Nesterly as one of the solutions for their housing shortage. And what is this? It's genius. It is so simple. Older adults who feel stuck in their home because they could sell it and make a tidy sum of money, but then there's no missing middle housing for them to buy, nothing that they want to move into. So they feel stuck with this asset that's got way too much room for them. And then in cities like Boston, there are a lot of young professionals who would love to get a deal on some rent. So you put these 2 things together. Older folks who've got rooms to give, younger folks who say, I will happily move into your house and help you with some house chores, like, I don't know, this teaching you the computer. I will gladly move in and help with raking leaves, running laundry up and down the stairs for a break in my rent, and we'll share the house. So that's Nesterly. The other example I want to share with you is from Sweden. It's called Salbo. And here the idea is similar and yet different. Salbo is a larger housing development. Half of the rooms, half of the apartments, small apartments, are saved for people over the age of 65, and the other half are saved for people who are in their 20s. And many of these people in their 20s are immigrants to Sweden. So the common spaces, as you can see here, are huge, like the kitchen, the dining room, the den, right? These common spaces are very large to promote community gathering. But the private spaces, everyone also has a private space, bedrooms, bathrooms, a small kitchen, etc. The private spaces are a little bit smaller, so you give up a little bit of a private apartment space in exchange for this much bigger space and for a place where the community can come together. Now, the country of Sweden sees a really positive benefit of this as new immigrants to Sweden learning the culture, learning the language with, friendly elders who are so happy to be surrounded by young people, young and even younger. So when we think about homing, certainly there are some things we need to do to think about how we do zoning and how we can speed things up. But we could also start to think of homing as a co-benefit for our youngest and our oldest. So next trend, here we go. Managed retreat. Managed retreat. What are we talking about when we talk about managed retreat? Here's what we're talking about. Managed retreat is going to be, we're going to increasingly see it. And some of you know what it is. In our last trend, we talked about the 4 million homes that we need just to solve today's housing crisis. This does not include the homes that need to be built or the relocations that are going to be happening from extreme weather. Now, just to put this in perspective, in 1980, we had about $3 billion disasters a year. 3 a year, so like one every 4 months. We are now having 17 of them in a year. So when you look at the Department of Transportation's budget to rebuild roads, you have heard about the shortage of workers for FEMA. We work for the American Red Cross as one of our clients right now. They are extremely short-staffed. We are just not built for this level of emergency response, and we're certainly not built for it around housing and managed retreat. Just to put this in perspective, over the last 40 years of floods and hurricanes and extreme weather events, we have been able to move 50,000 people at a cost of $3.5 billion. If we continue to work at this pace, it will take us over 1,000 years to move the number of people who are going to need to relocate due to extreme weather. So we need a system, a way of thinking about managed retreat in a way that is more proactive, in a way that is more efficient, and a way that is quicker. So managed retreat, and listen, up here in Wisconsin, we are well positioned to be one of those places that can welcome and bring more people to our state. I'm just waiting for those one-way U-Hauls to start coming up here from Florida. Can you kind of see it? Like I can kind of see a giant billboard, not too early, we don't want to do it right now, but to say something like, Wisconsin, no hurricanes, like 1-800-RELOCATE. So managed retreat is going to be about relocating at scale. Tiny little fact, when I worked in North Carolina about 5 years ago, there was a group of real estate agents who were positioning themselves as climate migration specialists, intentionally helping people from Florida move to North Carolina. Okay, next trend, here it is, uptown. I am so bullish about downtown over the next 10 years that I'm calling this uptown. Now I know some of you are like, Rebecca, really? You're bullish? This is how This is how I feel. My downtown is hollowed out. I don't know if it's ever going to come back, but I'm telling you, stick with it, because it's going to feel like this. Now, a quick history lesson. When you think about downtowns, originally, what were they? They were the heartbeat of commerce, society. This is the Haymarket in Edinburgh, right? On Sundays, they would have hangings there, public hangings, right? All kinds of entertainment for the family. It's actually, tiny fact, true fact. Did you know that the Scots invented the term hangover? Because I don't know if you met a Scot, but garden variety drinkers, those folks. They could give anybody in Wisconsin a real run for their money. So the Scots would drink a lot on Saturdays, and the hangings were on Sundays. So people would show up barely with their eyes open and certainly wanting to bite the hair of the dog. And so they called the term hangover was created because Sunday's hangings were accompanied by a hangover from Saturday night. But coming back, history lesson over. Coming back, when you think about what our town squares do, right? They are the economic, the social, the civic, the cultural heartbeat of our communities. So when you think about what's going to be happening with our downtowns over the next 10 years, there will be a whole-scale reinvention. Number one, table stakes is Wi-Fi everywhere. Like if we want to bring workers back downtown, if we want to bring work from homers downtown, we've got to be able to have that. That's like the plumbing for the next generation, right? We've got to be able to have high-speed internet. But then you think about what Chicago did, right? Chicago said, we're going to start really programming for Saturdays on State Street. And in the first week of programming Saturdays on State, they had 180,000 people show up. Now, the beauty of their reinvention of Uptown is that not only were Saturdays on State great for residents, but they were great for tourists as well. And that is the economic dividend that you get when you do some of these kinds of extra programming. The city of Richmond, Virginia is doing something really remarkable. They are, number one, they're mapping out every building that the city owns. And they are consolidating, and anything that's in the downtown area, they're saying, we are going to move out of that space because there's a higher and better use for that real estate. And they're figuring out how to sell that and program that to make the downtown even more robust. But here are the other two things they're doing. They're putting a high-tech high school downtown, and they're moving one of their campus satellite locations downtown. Because what you know for sure is that having young people downtown brings vibrancy and life to the downtown. So these are some more examples of the Saturday on State. Just the level of programming and how well it's been embraced. They did 1 million people in one summer of Saturdays on State. Now, the other thing that we can think about as we think about the future of downtowns is something that I don't think a lot of people think about. But if you, I know so many of you, I was born in Green Bay, raised in West Bend, I live in Madison now. One of the things we can do to improve our downtowns is simply remove harm. So, like Madison, where I live right now, the Greenbush neighborhood was a workers' neighborhood through the 40s and the 50s, and then during this 1960s period, a huge, 4-lane street was laid down right in the center of it, and it tore the neighborhood apart. This is actually Pasadena, California, in 1965. And then they made a similar decision as Madison did, and they said, what if we just put a little interstate interchange in here? It tore this neighborhood apart. So now they call it the Tab. It's just this dead-end, gulchy, grotesque blight in their community. But a group of people, the Pasadena Tomorrow folks, have come together and they've said, listen, we can do something about this. So there's a plan that puts a lot of green space down there, that creates public parks, pocket parks, does more infill, missing middle housing, right? So the point here is that sometimes we don't have to do a whole bunch more sometimes we can just look at some of the decisions we've made in the past and say, how could we put a neighborhood back together again? So, when we think about Uptown, we're thinking about how do we reinvent downtown, not just for our residents, but to be a place where visitors come as well. Next trend, let's do it. Senolytics. Some of you are like, you had me right up until this one, Rebecca. Senolytics. What is Senolytics? Well, I'm about to tell you. In 1989, Cher released her 19th studio album. The top song on that album was, If I Could Turn Back Time. Thank you. Senolytics. Senolytics may actually be able to turn back time. What are you talking about, Rebecca? We should really be paying attention to this here in Wisconsin. This state is getting older. If Senolytics can turn back time, we need to know what it is, and we need to know now. So here's what it is. Senescent cells are the opposite of healthy cells. Healthy cells, if you remember from biology class, they divide and they just continue to divide and grow more and more healthy cells. It's how your liver is a completely different organ in 7 years from what it is today because of the process of healthy cell genesis. Well, senescent cells are zombie cells. They are not good, and what makes them especially bad is they turn all the cells around them into senescent cells. That's why they're sometimes called zombie cells. And research on people who are aging show that older people have more senescent cells. And these are associated with things like, speaking only for a friend, skin that wrinkles, hair that grays, eyes that become less, 20/20 and more something else over time. Senescent cells are tied to a lot of the traditional things that we think of as, the aches and pains of growing older. But these crazy nerds at Scripps and at Mayo Clinic are starting to do therapies now and running tests, and they have found that if we can pull the senescent cells out of humans, they disappear and the healthy cells start to take over again. So we're starting to see with macular degeneration, we're starting to see with some of the aches and pains of aging, we're starting to see with some true diseases associated with aging that senolytics is literally putting sand back into the hourglass. Now, I know I'm going to lose about a third of you to Googling this immediately and finding out where you can get your over-the-counter cleanup crew for zombie cells. But I introduced this as one of the 10 trends for the next 10 years because America overall is aging. We're becoming, we in the West and Japan, we're among the most aging countries in the world. And so if we can figure out how to make aging a more pleasant, a less debilitating experience, a less expensive experience, frankly, also if we can keep people vibrant and alive and healthy and contributing in their communities through their 60s and 70s and so on, we're going to have stronger communities and a stronger state. So Senolytics. Now, next trend, China. In 1948, China created a 100-year plan. A 100-year plan to be a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? I mean, how many of your cities have a 100-year plan? The state certainly doesn't have a 100-year plan. Our country doesn't have a 100-year plan. China, a 100-year plan, in part because of their embarrassment after what happened during World War II. And in China, being embarrassed is it's the number one cultural thing that you do not want to have happen. So as a response to World War II, China said, we have a 2048 plan. 2048 is in I don't do math in public, how many years from now? 24 years from now. In one generation, right, China has this plan should come to total fruition. Now, what have they done? Well, they have invested $1 trillion into 122 projects in 149 countries called the Belt and Road Initiative. What are they trying to do? They're trying to create economic and geopolitical stability for themselves. This is a country that's willing to take the long view. Some of you may think that REM is a band that was big in the 1980s. Not in my world. In my world, REM is rare earth minerals. And what China has been able to do, rare earth minerals are the things that power our cell phones. Increasingly, they're used in climate technology, they're used in battery power, they're used in, the big three that China is focused on now. These rare earth minerals power all of our digital devices. And China either mines or has production and processing rights to 80% of the world's rare earth minerals. China has taken the long view, right? And what they are now, and believe me, the window is closing. So China has hit peak population. They are now going to be getting older and smaller. That, trying to gin up more than one child per family, that has not worked for them. So China hit peak population like 20 years ago. They hit peak population. They're becoming a smaller population, so their window is closing on their 100-year plan. And China is a country where Confucianism is real. And in Confucianism, you look for your enemy's opening. You look for your enemy's opening. So after January 6th, one of the things that happened was, China moved some of its ships into the Strait of Taiwan. Like, if the enemy is looking over here, we're going to do this thing over here. So this is not about, hating on the Chinese. This is not what this is about. What this is about is saying, America is in a competitive, and Wisconsin is in a competitive environment for our advanced manufacturing, for AI, for battery power, for many of these things that we think of as the future of our economy. And the number one, competition on so many of these fronts is China. I used to belong to a foresight group, and two of our members were from NATO. And I used to love to talk to those guys during happy hour. Because I'd always say, so what are you guys looking at now? And 2 years ago, they said, read every PhD paper written by a Chinese national in an American university, and you will know where China is headed with its policies and with its competitive advantage. All right, so China, working hard to become the next world leader. All right, we're getting close, guys. Next trend, trend 8. AI are the two vowels in magic, and I've got a take that I don't think you might hear other places. Magic. What is it that makes AI magical? Well, I really think it comes down to what Arthur C. Clarke said. Any sufficiently advanced technology feels indistinguishable from magic. And last week, we saw the first Nobel Prize winner win for doing something with AI, right, around medicine. Now, here's my take on the future of AI. The things that make humans awesome and differentiated from AI are these things. We know how to solve really complex problems, super complex problems. We also know how to motivate and lead groups, right? So a good pep talk or a really clear goal, we know how to get other humans drummed up. Another thing we're great at is empathy. The example I'm going to use here is my friend Sue's mom was recently diagnosed with cancer. And the doctor, whom I'm sure is using AI and generative AI to help with everything around Mrs. Shapcott's care, the doctor came in to the patient's room with a platter with tea and 3 cups on it, and sat down and had tea with Mrs. Shapcott and her husband. These are the things that make us completely human. And I don't see a moment in the next 10 years, and possibly beyond that, where AI takes over for those things. But then there are the things that AI is better at, right? And those are, right now, what AI is just a predictive model. Like if you're using ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others, what AI is literally doing is saying, this word should come after that word when I'm being asked this string of words. We think it's magic, but it's just predictively putting a word next to another word. Now, there are many other applications for it, and you're going to learn a lot about some of those tomorrow. But in the center of the human and AI Venn diagram are the things that we do together. And we're already doing a lot of those things with great effect, right? Harvard Business Review says consultants can be 40% more efficient and effective and accurate on some tasks when they're done with AI. So there's that overlap that we're sort of investigating now, and we will have more Nobel Prizes in other disciplines because of the human-AI overlap. But for the other things, I am not a fatalist, like AI is going to take us down, nor am I a complete optimist that AI is the be-all and end-all. I think it's going to fundamentally change some things, and it does seem like it's magic, and it's something we all must have some fidelity with. But is it the end of the world? Is it the beginning of a new world? I don't believe any of that's true. It's still too early to tell. But we definitely need some good and fair governance around it. So AI, it's two vowels in the word magic. This is this invisible force that is going to change and maybe in some cases disrupt the future of our economy. All right, last trend, schismogenesis. I know, I left the hardest word for the end. We'll say it together in just a second. Schismogenesis. I did the schismogenesis. Say it with me. Schismogenesis. Once more. Schismogenesis. That's how you say it. Now, where are my Packer fans? I'll do the first part, you do the second part. Dun, 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 dun. Go, Pack, go. Wow, Packer fans, that was very disappointing. Let's make room for more people. If you have a favorite sports team, could be the Packers, might not be. If you have a favorite sports team, on the count of three, shout it out. 1, 2, 3. All right, I heard some of those. Now, what's really interesting about this is some of you also hate certain teams. Like, it's not enough to just love your team. Some of you also, like, boy, did I learn this when I was working in the SEC. Like, I was working in Alabama. And I found out, like, if you love Auburn, it's not enough for them to win on the weekend. Alabama also has to lose. Like, that's a good weekend. That's a good weekend. So think of your most hated sports team. And on three, shout that out. 1, 2, 3. Nearly as loud as the people you love. This is a perfect example of schismogenesis, meaning the creation of, difference, the creation of tribes, the creation of difference. In this book, The Dawn of Everything, this book, I'll tell you what, this changed my life when I read this book a few years ago. It is an archaeologist and a polymath, and together they looked at the last 65,000 years of human history, and there is so much new science and new scientific evidence, and it's like a complete rewrite of what we know about were we hunter-gatherers, were we not, etc. There's a British historian who carries this book with him everywhere, so much so that his kids, remember they're British, they refer to it as Daddy's Orange Bible. But in this book, The Dawn of Everything, the conclusion was that over the course of 65,000 years, humans have always done these three things. Like you, they love their sports. But humans have also always had slavery. We have always oppressed each other. And finally, schismogenesis, this creation of in-groups and out-groups. These are the three big beats over 65,000 years of human history, the things that we have in common over all this time. Now, schismogenesis. We see this in a lot of different places. For example,
hello, I'm a Mac. And I'm a PC.
I mean, does this describe anybody else's marriage? I'm asking for a friend. And schismogenesis starts early. This is the church I grew up in, St. John's Lutheran Church in West Bend, Wisconsin. Yes, in West Bend, Wisconsin. But to get to school, my K-8 school, St. John's Lutheran Evangelical School, I had to go through the parking lot of St. Francis Cabrini Catholic School. So I know, you're with me. So literally, my mom, was one of those dorky kids. I did not have like a cool Hardy Boys lunchbox. I had one of those orange Tupperware lunchboxes. You know the ones that had like the orange square bottom, and it had like the little carrying case saddle with a plastic Tupperware top. Oh my God. My mom was a great baker, and she always like loaded us up with like fresh sandwiches and delicious fudgy cake. She would slide that lunchbox over the table, and then she'd look us dead in the eyes, and she'd be like, "Don't talk to the Catholics." That was our pep talk before we went to school in the morning. Schismogenesis starts early, you guys. Lutherans can't talk to Catholics. At the time I grew up, my God, if a Lutheran married a Catholic, it was like a mixed marriage, right? Schismogenesis starts early, so at that point, it's what your religion was. Now it is who is your political party, right? Who is the team that you root for? What do you believe about this and what do you believe about that? And what is accurate is that schismogenesis is timelessly true. It is in us as humans. It is in us to create in and out groups. But you know what we haven't had before this moment in our life is a $3 trillion industry called social media putting their thumb on the scale. And social media's algorithm is simple. If I can keep you honked off, I can keep you on the platform. Enragement equals engagement. So we are in this extremely weird moment where our natural human instinct to divide into in and out groups has $1 trillion of business right behind it, helping push that a little bit further. But here's something else that's true. Margaret Mead, famous anthropologist, the person who, you may have heard the quote, right? Never doubt what a small group of committed people can do. They can change the world. Indeed, she said, it's the only thing that it ever has. Well, she was an anthropology professor, and one of her students asked her one time, "Professor Mead, what is the first sign of civilization you've seen?" And she said, "The first sign of civilization I've ever seen is a sign of cooperation." And she talked about a bone that had been found, this femur bone, that had obviously been broken and healed back together. Now, to put this in perspective, when an animal in the wild is injured, what happens to it? It dies. It gets eaten. Nobody stays with it, right? Like, I'm seeing all these birds. I was at Horicon Marsh over the weekend, and all these birds are starting to migrate. And man, I saw this one bird, like all of its people had flown off, and I thought, oh, buddy, you're screwed, So in nature, animals that are injured will die, be left behind, be eaten by another predator. Mead said this was the first sign of civilization because clearly, if you breaking a femur can be just a life-threatening break right there, period, paragraph, end of sentence. But obviously, another human had stayed with this person, had brought them food, brought them water. This person wasn't able to walk anywhere. And the bone healed, and this person went on to live even longer. This is the first sign of civilization. So what is true is that we absolutely have this schismogenetic desire to create in and out groups. But we also carry within us this instinct to cooperate, this instinct to help each other, a sign of civilization. So my request of you, and frankly what we're trying to do here at this summit, is put our thumb on the side of cooperation, of working together, of calling out our better angels to work against this other force. So schismogenesis is the 10th and final trend. Now, I'm going to take a couple questions, if you have any. Oh, I have both photos of my my AI image. I've got a superhero one. Oh, here's a question coming in now. Got a superhero one, and I got a cubist one. I like the superhero one. I have a top knot in the superhero one. You'll never see that on me in real life, by the way. So what questions do you have? What questions do you have? Could be about any of these trends. Could be about churn, schismogenesis. I can't predict if the Packers are going to win the Super Bowl. I often get that one when I'm here in Wisconsin. Okay, for my anthropology father, I'll send you my negative review titled something like Shoddy Scholarship in Support of Trial Ilan Inclusion. Not a fan. Okay, on the dawn of everything. Great, please do send me that terrible review. I'd love to see it. You probably didn't want me to read that one out. I didn't say who you were. Appreciate it. What else? Any questions? Go ahead.
Are you making political predictions?
I've been told to stay far away from that, and I will do so. If you text me. Okay, what is trend number 2? Trend number 2 was brown, and it's about the imbalance between electricity demand and supply. And I'm going to put my QR code up there in just a second. You can download the whole 10 by 10 trends, like what the trends are, what to watch for, how this might impact our communities. Do you see a solution to schismogenesis with social media? I love this question. No, I don't, unless it's regulated in some way. And in order to regulate it, we'd have to prove culpability, and in order to prove culpability, I just think it's gonna be a minute. But what I do think is more likely to happen is we are gonna, I feel like this is already happening, and maybe it's happening with some of you, but this is tiring. The social media landscape is tiring. So people are leaving social media, they're dipping out of social media, they're not paying as much attention to social media, they don't want to be in the dumpster fire. And when that starts to happen, you'll start to see some changes. Now, I was encouraged because Instagram announced that it was going to put some more protections on for teens. And I would love to be optimistic about that, but I'm not, because I think what is happening is Instagram is bracing for something bigger. Because especially for teens, social media is like giving them, well, let me put it this way. In the hands of a brilliant surgeon, a scalpel can, remove tumors, it can save lives, it can heal people. If a surgeon tries to use a scalpel to pick their nose, it's going to be a bloody mess. And unfortunately, for our kids, social media is a scalpel being used in the wrong way. And I have to say, like, as a person my age, I'm 52, I feel like this is the one thing. I feel like our job is to protect our kids. This is the one area where we are failing our children. Absolutely failing our children. So I don't think it's going to happen without some public pressure. Man, you guys really got my number now. Holy crap. Okay. From last digits 1, 2, 3, 5, what can Wisconsin double down on where we might have an unfair competitive advantage into these trends you're tracking? The migration is definitely one of them. What we see is we are not gaining, more workers in the workforce over time, and we're going to need them. Why are we so polite? Why don't we just put on the full court press? Wisconsin is one of the places that, yes, okay, we might have more tornadoes, right? We might have more extreme rain events, but it's not the wreckage that we're seeing. All of the NORC countries, all of the countries that border the US and Canadian border are expected to have net in migration. So that's one of the things I think we could do now to double down. Oh, that was very nice of you, I saw that. Biggest environmental threat facing Wisconsin. I'm gonna have to think about this one and get back to you. This is not, one of the things you might notice with some of my, so some of you might be thinking, why don't you have sustainability up there, Rebecca? I tried to bring trends that are not obvious to everyone. Or if I had a trend that is obvious, what is my take on it that might be a little bit different from everybody? So you're right, some of you are catching me out on some of these, why isn't this in there? It's great, it's a really important trend, but I tried to bring you some new stuff. Okay, From 3425, I'm just going to take a couple more. With the current economy and birth rate, what do you think about the future of higher education? Number one, consolidation. That is part of the future of higher education, because we just don't have, this is nationally happening, but certainly here in Wisconsin, we just don't have as many people coming through that normal pipeline. But the other thing I will say is, the promise, okay. My dad was born in 1927. He went through the 7th grade. High school wasn't required, he was a farm kid. But when the economy moved, we made high school a requirement. You guys, the economy has moved several times since my father passed away. And the fact that we don't require applied, 2-year VOTAC, whatever degrees, we should be. We should be. Because the mismatch between the jobs of the future, and this has been going on since 2000, you guys, so we have got to move the stakes further down the road. So we should be requiring more beyond high school of our next generation. And then in terms of, higher education, I think we're going to see some contraction around that. All right, last one. Ooh, I got a Hotmail account in here. Oh, okay. What did you tell Missy the state's opportunities are around AI and future state that government can work towards? Well, I basically said I think we should think about AI with any of the critical sectors in Wisconsin's economy. And advanced manufacturing is one that lends itself really well to it. So one of the things you will hear me say again and again and again is if you're going to push your chips into the middle of the table on something, on a trend, make sure it has co-benefits. So we don't want to just do AI for the sake of doing AI. We want to do AI for the sake of creating more competitive advantage in something that we're already darn good at. So as you think about the future, as you think about trends, something to think about. All right. Final note, and I promise I'll get back to those of you who I didn't get to tonight. Final note, remember when I opened up and I said, what do you see across this room? People. What did I say I see? Futurists. Futurists. And here's the truth. We talked about if you're smart, you're riding the tops of the waves of change, but if you're wise, you're really thinking about those undercurrents of the waves of change. Final call to action for us as futurists. The future is not a place we go. The future, it's not a place we visit. With every action we take, with every action we don't take, with every conversation and collaboration, the future is a place we create. The future is a place we create. So it's not a place we go, it's a place we create. And as a proud Scotty, there's no place better to build a future. Yeah, we've got our challenges. But we've got a lot of benefits here as well. So here we go. This is where you can download the 10 by 10. It has been a pleasure being with you. And Kaya, bring Kaya back up to the stage!